Hey everyone, Minutia Minute here, back with another installment in my exploration of the Wars universe, designed by Decipher in the mid-2000s. This was intended as a replacement for the Star Wars customizable card game after they lost the Star Wars license. They put out a role-playing game, a base card set, and then one expansion before the whole experiment kind of came crashing down. When the next expansion came up for pre-order, it was quickly canceled based on the lack of interest, and that was pretty much the last we heard of the Wars franchise. Last time we looked at the core rulebook for the role-playing game and these two starter decks. Basically, we went over the first three factions of the game, which are the Earthers, the Ganjin, and the Mavericks. Those are basically the three human factions in the game. And then we didn't get a ton into the Shi and the Quay, which are the two alien factions. They weren't as heavily featured in the core rulebook, but we were promised more details on them in the Battlefront rulebook, which is basically the second half of the core rulebook. So today, we're going to take a look at this Battlefront RPG guidebook, which was actually a really fun read. I enjoyed this book quite a bit. And then we are going to open up the other two starter decks, which are alien forward. So we have the Swarm starter, which is centered around the Quay, and then we have the Suppression starter, which is centered around the Mavericks and the Shi. Before we dig too far into the Shi and the Quay, I just want to take a minute to shout this rulebook out, because this is actually a fantastic guidebook to the universe. If you're someone who wants to play the card game, but you don't want to learn the role-playing game, this book is an invaluable resource in getting to know the timeline, the different factions, and just everything about the universe. This book basically goes through everything that the core role-playing game goes through, and then layers in a whole bunch of stuff about the Shi and the Quay, and expands out upon what is currently my favorite faction, the Mavericks. First up, we have a timeline that goes through all the major events of the known universe. It gives us everything that we learned about the humans and the Martians and the splitting up of human society that we talked about last time, but it also layers in a ton of interesting information about the Sail system, which is where the Shi come from, the Quay, and how they became enslaved, and really is great for weaving those two different storylines together. As we continue through, we get a lot more details around the different factions. We get to learn about Earther entertainment, culture, government, and then the same thing when it comes to the Ganjin, the Mavericks. And the Maverick section actually goes into greater detail about the gangs too, which is really cool. The core role-playing goes into this as well, but this goes into a little bit more detail. So you find out about the Accord, which is sort of like the dominant faction. It's run by Raving Red Jane. It has about 15,000 members. You learn about the Hellcats, which are run exclusively by women. It's only about 400 members. I actually misspoke in my last video. They're not the second biggest, but they're sort of like the second most famous. You learn about the Nest, who are based on Ceres Station and are basically running the R&R for all the other Maverick factions. The Cartel, which is sort of like the Maverick CIA. The Cogs, which are the mechanics. The Knaves, which are sort of like a nicer version of the Accord. The Regulators, who are sort of like the, Texas Rangers of outer space. This whole section tells you how big these organizations are, where they're located within the solar system, who's running them, what they're like, just tons of detail. And the same thing with the Shi. So last episode we talked about how they had come through a rift in space into our solar system. They were fleeing their former slaves, the Quay, and that's kind of all we really knew about them. As you can see, we have several pages in here explaining their culture, what they do for entertainment, what their government is like. It breaks down their oligarchy and the various families that are in charge of various aspects of their civilization. We also get this really cool illustration of what these creatures look like. Alien and almost robotic and very menacing. The biggest takeaway I learned from reading this was just how structured and arrogant this alien race is. They're basically considered, the oldest form of intelligent life in the universe. And as they've traveled from system to system, they've never found sentient life that actually rivaled their capabilities. Generally, when they go somewhere, they end up deified because their civilization is just so far beyond the species that they're invading. And over a period of time, that has really gone to their head. The Quay, we learn, basically saw the Shi as, their gods. Over a period of time, the Shi took advantage of them because they could put them in ultra harsh environments and have them harvest ores and various resources, that kind of a thing, and ultimately left this species for dead. But the big thing I learned about the Quay in this is that they're hot-tempered, they're vengeful, and they thrive on adversity. So when the Shi left them for dead on a planet that was dying, they made the most of it, and any other species would have died in that situation, but they found a way to master their environment and come back for the Shi and exact their revenge. We learn about their entertainment, their government. In their case, they have various different tribes that represent different aspects of their government. They have a hodgepodge of religions, but ultimately they want to go back to their homeland. They don't even know what planet they're from, and so they want to find out where that is and go visit what's left of their species that's still left on that planet. You can see how they would, come into conflict. And what we learn in the timeline is the Shi basically travel the galaxy, enslave various species. The Quay was one species too many. The Quay exact their revenge by plotting an attack on the Shi homeworld, which we learn is, perfectly designed and constructed cityscape. The complete opposite of Earth, which is just sort of a hodgepodge of various corporate buildings kind of built on top of each other. For the Shi, everything is meticulously planned and thought out and executed. So the Quay show up on their homeworld to try to destroy them. The Shi have a super weapon that they're going to try to destroy the Quay with, but ultimately that super weapon gets thrown into the sun. Their sun is about to explode, and so in a last-ditch effort, the Shi harness the power of the sun, use that to open up a rift in space-time, push their planet through into our solar system, and then that brings us to where they entered the story that we discussed yesterday, where we found the Earth, the Ganjan, and the Mavericks all warring amongst themselves inside the solar system for resources. The whole process nearly destroyed their planet. There's a ton of volcanic activity going on the Shi homeworld, and all of their infrastructure that was perfectly designed is crumbling. Because they came into our solar system too far away from the sun, their planet is slowly growing colder, and they now have to find a way to leapfrog to survive yet again. But in this crippled state, they can't just decimate our solar system and the human race. It's going to be a little bit more difficult than that. And plus, the Quay are still hot on their trail, and they're in the solar system as well. So that's obviously a lot of information I'm dumping on you guys, but that basically is the first 30 pages of this book. It really does a ton to flesh out the other half of that story that we started with last week's Wars episode. Continuing through this book, I'll just go through this really fast, but there's a breakdown of all the Kaizen powers that are available, combat powers. There's body modifications, so people can get retractable claws, they can change the color of their skin, they can heal quickly, they can get gills, horns, and there's also like freeze powers, fire powers, mental telepathy, all that kind of fun X-Men type stuff, right? There is a section in here on prestige classes, which just adds to the various different classes that you can play in the role-playing game. And then one of my favorite sections, which we won't go through here today, but I'm guessing we'll get into some of these when we get into the card game. We have a section on the Warriors of Wars, and these are basically stats and bios for all of the major players in the Wars universe, whether they're Earthers, Ganjans, Mavericks, all the major characters are included in here. Last week we pulled the Kujiko Taraku card. She's basically on a mission to avenge the death of her kinsman at the hands of the Accord. So she hates the Mavericks, and specifically Raving Redhead Jane, who we find out in this manual was formerly a Ganjan, actually. We've got sections on the Mavericks. There's Raving Red Jane, by the way. We've got sections on the Shi and major characters in that civilization. There's only a couple standout ones there. A couple of significant Quay. Before we get into miscellaneous rules, we also have a whole section that digs into the solar system geography. This was super helpful, so I actually showed this map in the video from last week, but we get bios on basically every significant location listed on this map of the solar system, including Sayal, the Shi's home planet, and the Moomun Rift that brought the planet into our solar system. Just a ton of great juicy details in here, from Earth to Mars, and then on to the various moons and asteroids of the universe, which is where a lot of the meat and potato locations of the card game, I think, are actually going to play out. One of my favorite little elements is Europa, which is run by the Cartel. So Europa has 40 kilometers of ice on the outside of the planet, but the whole thing is basically just an ocean, which is true geography. That's not something they made up for this game, and there's a lot of actual scientific fact interspersed with the futurist sci-fi elements of the story, which is also really cool, and I like that they included it in here. But as a result, all of the various bases on Europa are actually underneath the planet's crust in this ocean space that you can't access easily because it's 40 kilometers underneath ice, which I just thought was like a really cool little piece of flavor text for this universe. Anyway, so obviously we want to get into some card rips. I wanted to make sure we talked a little bit more about the Shi and the Quay, round out our timeline of this universe. I hope you're finding this lore interesting. I certainly do, and it certainly helped me appreciate when I was ripping into these two starter decks here, just because I had a much better frame of reference for what I was looking at. I understood some of the intent behind the designs of the characters and the weapons and the locations and all that kind of stuff. Really just makes this a much more vibrant and interesting universe to explore through these cards. I hope you're as excited as I am to dig into two more starter decks today. Okay, so in the words of Hannibal Lecter, okie dokie, here we go. We'll start with the Maverick Shi deck, which is the Suppression starter. I think I want to start with this one just because I'm still really excited about the Mavericks and I want to learn more about them. I was a little bit bummed when we opened up the Earther Maverick deck that there was really just a sprinkling of Maverick cards in there, so hoping we get a few more in this set. Opening it up, yes, there is a rulebook, so that's great. It's still weird that we didn't get a rulebook in that very first pack we opened, but no big deal. No harm, no foul, right? Alright, so it looks like blue is, not surprisingly, going to be the color of the Shi. These are going to be some cool cards, just because the alien design of the Shi is really neat, and I haven't actually been super impressed by the foils up to this point, but this one is pretty cool. It works well with the blues. So we have a unique character, Renarti Anat. A consummate pilot and wayfarer, Renarti favors exploration over conflict. Its skills have brought it tremendous success in both endeavors. And this, I think, is an exclusive card to this deck. If you'll remember, every one of these starter decks has 5 foils, exclusive cards, and an illustrated and easy to understand rulebook. We've got Selfless Protector, which is another character, a Shi warrior, does not hesitate to defend their council. Another unique character, Devanar Demir. Devanar's interrogation skills are well known to the Quay. Yeah, these are pretty darn cool cards, dare I say. It's cool that we're getting more than one, proper character in this particular deck after the last two decks where there was only basically one character in each of those. Alright, skipping ahead, it looks like our last foil is going to be a Maverick card, Sultry Opportunist, and you can see now, looking at the bottom, this is a member of the Nest faction. Alright, and then we have Ganymede, a forward base. We have a well-concealed charge, an asset, a Kaizen Sentinel, a ship, a Tylok Coral, another ship, a Sayalshi Upholder, a Ganymede Harvesting Camp, another location, a Ceres Belt Hideaway. This is like the main sector location that's been in all the decks so far. Tragedium Heist, which is an interrupt, and if you'll remember, Tragedium is like a special resource that the Shi are particularly interested in. One of the things they talk about in the Battlefront rulebook is that it was actually a byproduct of mining, it was seen as waste, and then now that the Shi and the Quay are really interested in it, humans have realized that they know something we don't, and so humans are experimenting with it, trying to figure out what makes it so awesome, which I thought was kind of interesting. Bit of flavor. Next we have Anant Aeronaut character, another Tylok Coral, a Nimble Jockey. That's a cool card image. This is in one of the Wars role-playing game books. I can't remember which one. Alright, another Tylok Coral, a Stinger, which is a Maverick vehicle. I think the Stinger was featured in the Earther Maverick deck also. A Sailing Vitarma, which is a weapon I believe is fired with telekinetic powers, so it's like both a staff but also a projectile weapon. And if you're a human, you can't fire it if you get access to the weapon unless you have Kaizen abilities that are somehow telepathically related. Alright, we have another Stinger, another Well-Concealed Charge, a Squadron Lead, which is a ship, Ganymede Frontier Camp, we saw this one last week, Sudeva Coral, another ship, I think we saw that one, another Harvesting Camp. Alright, we have another unique character, Irama Vishal, an experienced explorer. Irama is confident enough to investigate other cultures in their own environments. Awesome, that's really cool. Anant Aeronaut, Sayalshi Upholder, Stinger, Rama Vishal, Harvesting Camp, a Sailing Vitarma, Expansion, which is a neutral card. It's an interrupt. I think we saw this one. Last week also. Alright, a Frontier Camp, a Kaizen Sentinel, Frontier Camp, Coral, another Nimble Jockey, a Vantage Point. We saw that one prior week also. Coral. Hey, this is a new one. Orehound. We've got Kevin Smith in a spacesuit here. That's pretty cool. Okay, this is cool. Themis Mobile Asteroid. So you can see this looks like a ship slash an asteroid, and that's because the asteroid was mined to the point that it was completely hollowed out, and then Mavericks turned it into a ship. They took a whole bunch of grav force engines that they had stolen and affixed it to this asteroid, so now it can kind of slowly move around the system, which is a really, really cool touch. Alright, another Kaizen Sentinel, another Sailing Vitarma, Kevin Smith again, Coral, Squadron Lead. I'm not sure if we saw this one. These ones definitely, like, these are going to be tough to tell apart. A little too similar. I like the organic style of the ships, even though they're a little bit, plain. The idea of that is cool. Well-Concealed Charge, Independent Transport. We saw this one in another deck. I can't remember which one. I think it was the Earther deck. Frontier Camp, Aeronaut, Transport, Stinger, Nimble Jockey, Sayalshi Upholder. Alright, another Ganymede Tragedium Source. We saw that one last week. And of course, not complete without a Tragedium Heist. Expansion. Okay, this is cool. This is Sayal, which is the homeworld of the Shi, and it looks like it's not just one planet, this is a sector, so it's a little bit different in Star Wars. You know, you just have a planet card, and this is a sector card, so this is the light side of the planet, so presumably there's a dark side as well. And then finishing things out with Tragedium Heist. This was a cool deck, actually. I really enjoyed running through that one. The Shi cards were particularly cool, and on top of it, lots of, you know, proper characters, you know, not just generic Oreman, or, I mean, we had Oreman, but, you know, especially the Earther deck, it was a little disappointing because it was just like Infantry Trooper, and then there was like 50 of those, and then there was like Infantry Leader, and then there was like 10 of those, right? In this, a lot of specific characters, unique characters, created for the game, so that is really neat. That was fun to go through for sure. All right, so that brings us to our last starter deck, which this is the Quay Deck. It is all Quay all the time. Really excited to see how this one turns out. The Quay are pretty messed up. They're like insectoid, devil, alligator, crab people. A lot of potential for some cool illustrations in this one, so let's dig right into it and see what we got. Looking at it, we have, once again, got our manual. And right at the top, we are going to, wow, look at that. That's cool. So it looks like black denotes if it's a Quay, and we have a proper character again based on the little bullet next to their name. This is Tulkin. Tulkin assumed control of the Kurim tribe by killing the leader during ritual combat. His fury leads him into battle ahead of his troops. And of the 5 tribes, the Kurim is the youngest because they supplanted another tribe. I don't remember what the name of the prior tribe is, but that's an aspect of Quay politics, where they have this sort of up-and-coming tribe, and the old tribe wants to get, you know, back into the good graces of the other 4 tribes. All right, we have Rally Cry, an asset. Volt Scrounge, which is a character. Another gnarly piece of artwork there. All right, we have another Tulkin. Revenge, which is an interrupt. Makes sense as an interrupt. We know that the Quay are vengeful creatures, and we can see them just wasting this member of the Shi. I just realized that's a claw going through his brain. That is messed up. Cool. All right, we have Ganymede, Occupied Tunnels, location. Frenzied Luhus, character. I don't know what Luhus refers to. I'll have to go back and look at the book. The Beckoning, which is an order, and an order is like an effect in Star Wars. Basically, these can only be played on your turn during your deploy phase, whereas interrupts can be played at any time, but they somehow, you know, change the mechanics of the game in that moment. I don't get the impression that orders are as permanent as effects were in Star Wars. All right, we have a neutral card, a Type 2 fighter. Cool design on this one. Man, so far, both of these decks are just got a lot of cool designs on them. All right, we have another Ceres Belt Hideaway. So this is a location that every single deck has had so far. All right, Ganymede Hunter's Camp. I don't even know what I'm looking at there, to be honest with you. Interesting. Expansion. This is another card that's been in every deck. Neutral card. Kurim Life Ship. Oh, that's a ship. Okay. Cool. These, the Quay kind of remind me of the Yuuzhan Vong from Star Wars a little bit. Just like the organic style of their ships. I guess the Shi kind of have a similar thing going on, but more so with these guys. Torrid Katal, which is a character, and it looks like he's getting ready to blow fire. One thing about the Quay is that they can go into like an adrenaline-fueled rage state, kind of like a berserker mode or something like that, where like their body temperature literally goes up, and like they're more ferocious and blah blah blah, etc., etc. Kind of a cool aspect of them as a race. We've got Catal Insider, who is a character, and Catal is one of the tribes, I believe. Another hunter's camp. Ilna Hekan, which is a ship, and again, pretty sweet ship design there. Also very organic, like Yuzhan Vong style. Type 2 fighter. Saw that. Saw that. Saw that. Another Insider. Ganymede Valley. This is another card that has been in many decks. I don't know if it's been in every deck. It might not have been in the Earther one, but I think we had it in the Ganjin deck and maybe the Shi deck. Ganymede, Tragedium Source. We've seen that today. A Taka Life Ship. It's like propelled by thousands of hecatons. I don't know what hecatons are. I'll have to look that up. But they're like little projectiles, it looks like. Interesting. That's cool. The Beckoning. We saw that, I think. It's an order. Luhis Dalaka, which is a weapon. They're spurs used in melee. Another ship. Interesting, this one has 2 of the Tragedium sources. Another ship. Frenzied Luhus. McCall Shrieker, that's a new one. Another gnarly illustration with this one. And, I mean, gosh, these things look like they're like devils or something. They're really something else. These guys, the Mavericks, and the Shi are where it's at. I'm not nearly as interested in the Earthers. And the Ganjin, I love the idea of them, but I haven't seen the most amazing cards from them. We'll have to see if it gets cooler once we get into some of the boosters, but I was actually kind of disappointed in their deck. I thought there was going to be kind of more going on there. Kurim Rager, I don't remember if we saw this character. I think we did. Another Hunter Camp. That's cool. A Mauler. Another Catal Insider. Torrid Catal. Shrieker. Another ship. A lot of Type 2 fighters in here. I wonder why they're using those fighters at all. Your lore is breaking down. I'm confused. Why would you use those fighters? It doesn't make sense. Another weapon. We saw that. Life ship. Shrieker. That awesome Mauler card. Comment down below. Do you guys think that the art on these are like the best art that we've opened so far? Because I definitely think so. I also really dig the borders on these cards, like the thorny rock face thing going on there. That's sweet. Life ship. I think we're pretty much into duplicate land now. Go through these pretty quick. Shrieker, Rager, Hecaton, Dalaka, and a Frenzy Luhus. Alright, cool. Well, that was the Quay deck. Probably the most exciting deck we opened. I thought that was sweet. The Shi deck was also sweet. I think both of these decks, just visually, I'm talking about, from an art perspective, really blew the Earther one out of the water, especially, and to a certain degree, the Ganjin. Next week, get excited. We are going to dig into some booster packs and see what specialized cards are out there. If you look at the back of these, it says they are intended to be used to enhance the core starter decks, which are sold separately. So, you know, it'll be interesting to see how much overlap, because there's only 5 unique cards in these sets. But I'm hoping this is where we get to see a lot more of those specific, specialized cards that are alluded to in the role-playing game core book and the Battlefront rulebook. Especially, I mean, there's a lot of characters that they introduced in that Battlefront book that I'm just really stoked to get those cards and really see what they can do. So get excited. Next week we dig into some traditional boosters. As we go through the boosters, we'll talk more lore in detail. Just a lot of cool little factoid tidbits about this universe, for which we've really only covered the broad strokes so far, so get excited for that. Those of you guys who stuck around to the end of this video, I said this last time, you guys are the true believers, because you don't get much more esoteric than doing a video on the Wars TCG, but hopefully you are enjoying this journey with me. I am having an absolute blast, so the videos are going to keep coming. And hopefully this video also reaches some of you out there who are actually looking for this as a resource, or just some kind of Wars content because you like the Wars universe too. Leave a comment down below. What did you think of this week's starter rips? And I hope you guys have a great week in gaming. Thank you so much for watching, and take care.